Good grief, this thing is huge. What's up, happy fabricators? In this video, we're gonna be doing an unboxing of the PrimeWeld 325X. This is a dual voltage AC DC TIG welder that boasts 325 amps, on-demand fans, and a plethora of other features that we're gonna try right here in this video. So a quick little clarification before we get started. I had some people in my last review video a little upset that I didn't outright say I recommended the machine, and I'm going to say the same thing with this video. It's hard for me to recommend something if I don't have the hours on it to say firsthand. This is an unboxing video, and my goal for this video is to provide you with the information of all the features, show you examples of how they work and how they perform, and hopefully in the end provide you, the customer, with enough information to further your decision on whether or not this is the machine for you. Now I'm getting excited, so let's open this thing up and give it a try. Now, as always, I spared you guys the drama of unboxing all this stuff. Let's jump right into the components that this machine comes with. First and foremost, we have our owner's manual that all our PrimeWeld machines come with. Very simple, color pages. This thing goes as far as to break down your waveforms and just kind of give a good, clear representation on how to get started with this machine. So next up, what we have here is what a lot of people refer to as the Nova style TIG pedal. It's a good TIG pedal. It's what they run with their other machines now, and I haven't had any problems with it. We have our dual voltage pigtail lead. So this allows you to plug the 220 outlet in the back of this machine into a 110 wall outlet in the event that you need to do something off of 110 or don't have 220. We have a stick stinger here. Now I'm going to grab the other stick stingers that comes with the other machines and just kind of give you a close-up and show the difference. This thing is much more robust. So as you can see here, this is the style that PrimeWeld has traditionally came with, this little guy here, and this is the current new one. So it's got a much more heavy-duty, robust clamp here. It's got a larger gauge wire on it. I believe it's the same length. They're both 12-foot leads, but that's cool to see just a little bit more going into that. Next up, we have our ground or earth clamp, and they have upgraded this as well. We've got a heavier gauge wire with our quick disconnect DINS connector again, and a solid brass clamp on this thing. Just for reference, this right here is what the PrimeWeld 225 or a lot of their other machines comes with, and you can just see the size difference. This is rated for 300 amps, whereas this is not. After that, we've got our standard regulator that comes with all their machines. Good enough to do the job. After that, we have a finger switch. This is just an on-off switch for you to use on the TIG torch itself in the event you don't want to use the pedal. We've got our argon hose here with nice crimped fittings and a nice flexible hose. And the last thing is a set of consumables. Now, these are for the CK17. It's got a short back cap, a long back cap, piece of tungsten, a couple collets, and a couple cones in there. This welder, unlike the other welders, comes with the option to not purchase the torch with it, which is what I ended up doing. So I don't have a torch here, but I will read off on the website what the options that they sell with torches are. We have the CK17, which is air-cooled torch in a 12-foot lead. We've got the CK17 in a 25-foot lead. We have the CK18 in a 12.5-foot lead, which is a water-cooled torch. We've got the CK17, which is a 12.5-foot lead. We've got the CK20, which is a water-cooled in a 12.5-foot lead, and we've got the CK20 in the 25-foot lead, which is also water-cooled. And that's what I'll be putting on this machine and using with it is the CK20. And I'll just leave you to do your due diligence to decide which torch is best for your application. So let's get this thing assembled and start running some beads. Okay, so before we actually start welding with this thing, we're just going to look over this thing and show you the general features of it and how it works. Okay, so by far the biggest thing that I noticed with this is obviously it's on and there are no fans going. So the on-demand fans is going to be a great thing, but we'll go over what our knobs and buttons are here. We have our TIG MMA function, so we can either have it in stick mode or TIG mode. We've got AC DC, so AC DC. We've got our frequency. We've got our balance, and this is the other cool feature of this machine is all of these knobs will directly go up and correlate with the readout, whereas the TIG 225, only the current knob did that. Another big thing that I liked that I forgot to mention is down here, the switch is on the front. You don't have to reach around the back and play the braille game to try to find your on switch. Getting back to our knobs here, we have our start current. Now this is mostly going to be used if you're using your T4 setup. We've got our upslope, our peak current, or our actual amperage that we're going to be using here. And so we've got down to, let's start with DC. We have down to 5 amps start on DC, which is an upgrade from the TIG 225, which prior, I believe, started on DC at 10 amps. And then on AC, we've got a 10 amp start, which is a huge upgrade because on the 225, I believe the AC current had a starting amperage of 30 amps. So that's going to be huge for the AC side. I'm excited to give that a try. We've got our downslope, we have end current, we've got pre-flow, so we can go anywhere from 0.1 seconds on a pre-flow up to 3 seconds on a pre-flow. We've got base current, we've got pulses per second, so if we're set up on our pulse button here, we have a pulse off, pulse high, and pulse low. So pulse low, we have from 0.5 to 10 pulses per second, and if we're on pulse high, we have 200 pulses per second down to 10 pulses per second. So there's that range there. Turn our pulse off, or actually, and then we have pulse duty, which shows the duty cycle of our pulses, and then post flow, which we have from 0 post flow up to 15 seconds, yeah, of post flow. I was moving too fast for the machine there. Now we have our 2T, 4T buttons, so I won't go into depth about that. Most of the welding you're going to be doing, you're more than likely going to be on 2T there. We have our AC frequency, so we have from 20 hertz all the way up to 300 hertz. Now that's an upgrade from the 225. The 225 went up to 200 hertz, so that jumps that guy up a lot further. And then our balance goes from 20% all the way up to 80%, which is interesting to me because we actually lost a little bit of range there. The TIG 225 went from 10% up to 90%, so I'm curious about that. But so far, first impressions, I'm really liking it. Just looking at the body of the machine, I really like the fact that it's got the 2 handles to be able to grab it like this. It is a heavier machine, so just the ergonomics of having 2 handles is really great. It's got lots of good airflow on the front and the back. The fan on the back of this thing is huge. I'm actually curious to see how loud it is. We'll have to break out the decibel meter. I really like how they modeled the plastics after the 285. I feel like having these solid plastics is going to be more robust instead of having the individual corner pieces. So I guess that's enough staring at this thing. Let's see how it works. Okay, let's do some welding. I've got some mild steel coupons here. I'm going to run through an assortment of those. I used my Weld Metals Online coupons. They're great. Got a coupon code for those down in the description if you are interested. And then I'm going to show you the results when I'm done. I have the machine sitting down over here because the thing creates a lot of turbulence, and I just wanted to give it the benefit of the doubt and keep that away from the table. So the machine's down below, so we're not going to be blown away any of our shielding gas. Let's get started. Okay, so we got some coupons welded up here, and this is some 16 gauge here. We've got some 10 gauge or 1/8 inch, and then we've got some, this is like 5/16, it's just a little thicker than 1/4 inch. I don't know if that is going to focus in for you guys. There we go. And it's pretty smooth. I didn't see like a significant difference in the stability of the arc over the TIG 225, but it seems pretty good. The arc starts are definitely a little different. Not good or bad, just different. Something for me to get used to, I guess. So let's jump over and try some pulse features. So for pulse, let's see, I'm going to start off with a low pulse. We'll go like 2 pulses per second. And then a pulse duty cycle. I like to run my pulse duty cycle really low because most of the time the whole intention of running pulse is keep your temperature down. So we'll try that. We'll try 30%. Okay, so this is our first pulse go, and that was running about 30% duty and about 2 pulses per second. Pretty clean. And then here's one that's at about 30 pulses per second. Same duty cycle. You can see there's a tighter pattern there. Okay, now that we've ran some mild steel and pulse, let's jump over to some stainless. Okay, so here's our stainless. We've got some 16 gauge here, and then we've got some 1/8 inch or 10 gauge. Now this was just with a number 6 gas lens that I've been doing this entire review with, so if I had a flood cup on there, probably could have made it look a little cleaner, but not too bad, pretty smooth. Okay, next we're gonna do some aluminum welding, so we're gonna jump over to AC. We'll turn our frequency somewhere around 120 hertz-ish. Balance, we'll go 30 to 35 on the balance. And then that should be all we need. Don't need as much pre-flow. We're doing aluminum. We'll give it a 1/2 of a second of pre-flow, and we should be good to go. Oh yeah. I dipped it. I'm liking it though. This thing is so smooth on AC. Very nice. Yes. The AC is so smooth on this thing. Okay, so here's some quick aluminum. We've got some 16 gauge back here. This thing is so smooth on aluminum. And there's some 10 gauge. Both of the, that's another 16 gauge. Now I'm going to bump my tungsten up to 1/8 inch. Since we're going to be putting some amperage through it, and we're going to try to run some 3/8 aluminum. This thing runs so smooth on aluminum. Check this out. Let me get some pliers because this is hot. Look at that. Nice fat bead there, single pass, 3/8 aluminum, cold steel, cold aluminum. It wet in beautifully. And that AC startup arc is so much smoother than the TIG 225. Okay, so now that we've went through all the materials and used some of the features on this thing, we're going to throw the multimeter at it and see what the specs on it actually are. We're going to see how much amperage it has. We're going to see how close its balance ratings are and how close its frequency is. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is hang the multimeter up here so we can see how much, what our amperage is that's displayed and what our actual amperage is here. So I'll just go over to DC to do this because it'll be quieter. That's full amps right there, and we'll let off. Okay, so on the amperage there, we were really close. I was seeing 327 on the machine readout, and I was seeing like 328 on the multimeter there, which is really close. We're within a point or two there, so that's exciting to see that accuracy, and also see that this thing pumps out what it says, that little more amperage than it's spec'd even. Okay, sorry about the fans here. Now we are going to do our frequency. So we're going to bring our multimeter over to our hertz. We're going to move over to AC, set it at 120 hertz, and see what we get. Okay, so I seen 119 to 123 there. That's right in the ballpark. Okay, so the next thing we're going to test is our balance. So we're going to put our multimeter over to our percentage, and then we're going to go over to our dial here, and let's just say 35% on the balance. And that was not bad there either. Once the machine leveled out, we were seeing in between 35 and 38%. So we're within 2 points on that, and I feel like that's pretty good. So I know that the TIG 225, that is one of its downsides on the AC side, especially on the low end. It had some balance problems, and then the arc starts were just a little bit rough on the AC side when you're in a lower amperage. But this thing is so smooth on the AC, especially on the low side, establishes that arc just like that. Okay, so I wanted to give you a quick overview on the stick welding feature. Unfortunately, you guys can chew me out about this in the comments. I'm not gonna have Grandpa here, I'm not gonna have the time. Didn't work out right, and I'm not enough of an authority on this with stick welding to give this machine probably any justice, so we're just going to assume that it is in the same ballpark as all their other machines so far, but I'll just show you how to set it up. So we click over to MMA here, our center knob, all our stick welding MMA stuff is highlighted with yellow. So we have our current, so we have from 250 amps all the way down to 20 amps. We have hot start, which you can go off or all the way up to 50, and I assume that's a percentage range. And then we've got arc force, we have from off up to 100 on the arc force. Okay, so after I've had this thing, played with it for a couple weeks, used it on a couple jobs, I would just want to give you my final thoughts and opinions and the pros and cons that I see initially with this machine. So we'll start with the pros, because that's the fun stuff. First off, on-demand fans are amazing. You don't have to worry about flipping this thing off and on all the time if the fans bother you, which in a small shop like mine, the fans drive me nuts. So being able to just have them turn off on their own is a game changer for me. Second pro is the price point. Honestly, what you get and the performance you get out of this machine for the price point, it's a really good value for your dollar. Third thing is the size. I really appreciate how they kept it in a fairly small package. It's really not that much bigger than the TIG 225. I'm pointing because it's down over here. It's a little bit longer, but it's technically just a little bit shorter. And so for a 325 amp machine, I really like how they kept it compact. It's definitely heavier. I think it's probably got about 15 or 20 pounds on the 225. It's definitely heavier. The other pro to this machine, and I think one of the most impressive to me, is the AC side, or welding aluminum with this machine. Anybody who has ran the 225 knows that it had a little bit of trouble on the accuracy of the balance and the low-end AC startup. I mean, you can do thin stuff with the 225, like if it's down to 16th, but anything below that, that arc startup was just a little bit erratic and just made it a little more difficult. This thing is so smooth as butter. It just makes me smile every time I weld aluminum with it. And the heat that it puts out on the thick stuff. I'll show some examples here in just a little bit of some more 3/8, and the thing just, it's so smooth on AC. I really enjoy welding with this thing on AC. Another pro of this machine is all the knobs translate to the digital readout. Now, this isn't as big of a deal to me, but I know it is to a lot of you guys, so that's cool that PrimeWeld listened to the majority of their customer base and added that. Another cool thing about this machine is they really up their game on the quality and gauge of their leads, especially on like the ground and the stick stinger. They up the gauge of those wires, and then you've got a solid brass ground clamp, so that's cool to see. And then the final pro that I've seen with this thing is the switch on the front here, which I love that. I love being able to, in the event that you gotta back this thing up on your cart or whatever, you're not having to be like hunting back here with your gloves on, using the braille method, trying to turn your machine on. Just having it up front and center is really nice. But honestly, I have to get used to it. I keep going to the back of the machine first. And then we have the cons of this machine. Now, there's not a lot of them, but we need to talk about them. The first thing is probably a personal preference. From the research that I've done, if I'm understanding correctly, talking to other people in the industry, this machine for the high frequency startup uses a resistor instead of a point system. So if you notice the points on the TIG 225, you get that little blue buzzing light, which is what's initiating that high frequency and helps you jump that initial arc. Whereas this machine, if I understand correctly, correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments, but it has a capacitor that loads up and releases to, and what I've found personally is it's kind of harsh and not always consistent right off the bottom end. As soon as that arc is established, the thing is smooth as butter on DC. But I feel like the startups are just not as crisp as the 225. So personally, I feel like the TIG 225 has smoother and softer arc starts on the DC side. But that might just be a personal preference of mine on the way that arc starts up. Talking to several people in the industry, it sounds like a lot of machines are moving more and more towards this capacitor instead of using a point system. So I just want to let you know what I've observed with that. So the second con to this machine that I was a little bummed out about was the water cooler port on the back is not connected in relation to the on-demand fan. So when this machine turns off, or the on-demand fans shut off, your water cooler is still going to continue to run. So it would have been cool to see that connected so that everything shuts off and everything starts back up. But it is what it is, and it doesn't make it any less functional as a machine itself. Another con is it is definitely louder, I believe, than the TIG 225, but that's also understandable because the fan on the back of this thing is like huge. It's probably like, I don't know, 8 or 10 inches diameter. So it's going to do a very good job cooling, and when you got big fins, they're going to make more noise in most cases. So just an observation, not necessarily a complete con, but just an observation. It's a little bit louder, I believe, than the TIG 225. And the final con that I noticed has to do with the digital readout. When you go to move and change your values, it doesn't necessarily recognize them right away. So you can't just like move it just a little bit all the time and it'll recognize it. You actually have to kind of be a little more extreme with the knob, kind of like wake it up and say, hey, I'm using this knob. Then the readout will register which one you're at, and then you can turn it back to the desired value that you're looking for. Okay, so just for a quick example here, explain what I'm talking about. I had this on low pulse, so I go to my pulse per seconds, and let's say I set it at 3 seconds. So we're turned up there at the like, I don't know, 11, 10 o'clock range right here. Well, if I start to creep this down, say I just want to adjust it down just a little bit more, and you can see it does not show up on the readout as I turn it down slowly. And when I had it turned down like this, it was still running at 3 seconds, even though it was turned all the way down to what should be a half a second. So you have to grab this thing and kind of violently let it register and then turn it down to a half a second. So the settings on this thing will not correlate unless the actual readout translates it to the board. So if you just grab it and move it slightly, it won't do it. You have to physically get a hold of it and wake it up for those things to read and be accurate per your desired parameters. Now, it's definitely not a deal breaker. It's just something that I noticed you have to be aware and just kind of like move the knob around a little bit before it registers with the machine, and then you can turn it back to that value. But overall, I really like this machine. I'm definitely going to be using it more primarily as my aluminum machine, and I think my TIG 225 is going to be my steel machine because, like I said, I definitely prefer the DC startups on the 225 over this thing, but this thing is amazing on aluminum. Like, it's really nice. So I think we're going to jump over and just run some more beads so you can see some more performance, and we will see you on the next one. So once again, if you want to see more fabrication content, click some of the links that are going to pop up here. If you want to be notified of upcoming videos, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. It's free to do so, and go build something, guys. Okay, let's do a big piece of 3/8 aluminum here. There we go. Gonna be hot, but single pass 3/8. Single pass 3/8, not too shabby. Hot. Now we're gonna do a big old weave cover pass. So 3/8 wash pass. So the width of that weld is almost 3/4 of an inch.